So basically, we have about 45 minutes, and I thought maybe an question answer kind of interaction may be a better option because knowledge is infinite, and frankly, it's very difficult to contain it into few words. But just to let the ball rolling, what I'll do is I'll share some of the insights and understanding that I have got through the long journey of yoga. So one of them is, the way we look at the human body itself. When I went through my medical school, and I suppose that's how it is in most of the medical schools, I got an understanding that this body is nothing but, it's all matter, chemicals, and that's it. And I am part of this. Somewhere I am this body, and I am this chemical, I am this, babbling neurons, and I think it's me. And it's not a very good feeling you get, that I'm just this body, nothing else. So it also raises questions about the validity of me, myself, forget about my experiences and everything else. Many questions. So that's how the journey began. And then one of the first things that I discovered, and which yoga teaches us, which I find is something of very capital importance, is that the self is not the body. It sounds very strange. There is something through our subjective spaces which we can discover as concrete, even more concrete than the body, which is other than the body. So then the relation changes of me, as I call myself, and the body itself. For example, when I am identified with the body, I am always full of anxieties and fears. What may happen to it? And I rush here and there to somehow preserve it. I must survive at whatever cost, in whatever way. But when I separate myself and know that the self is not the body, then I look at it like a tool or an instrument which has to be set right. It doesn't mean I become neglectful of it. But one thing I know, that whether this body stays or not, I am. So it's a fundamental vantage point. Because the sense of existence is very deep rooted in us as humans. And we identify with different things and say it's me. But all these things with which we identify are, if we look at very clearly, are very temporary, are immutable, they are ever changing. So we need to hold to something more stable, more, something which is not affected by the flux and flow of time. So this self which I am speaking of is that. It's not a psychological self which also changes. Because, morning I am one person and evening I may be another person. But is there something stable and enduring? So this was the first knowledge of yoga, not just a theoretical knowledge. Theoretical knowledge is just to start with, and then you shift inward and you discover something very different and very unique, more concrete than anything else. So it takes away the fear and sting of life, this feeling of being pursued like a hunted animal by countless forces, material and otherwise. Then normally in medical school we look at body as a set of material processes, chemicals and all their interactions, and it's valid in its own field. It's not that this knowledge invalidates this one. It's like we look at a computer and it has all the parts and processes and we need to understand it, and wonderful. But we can also look at the body from purely an energy perspective. I tell you how it changes our understanding of the way we look at the body and its workshop. So, for example, normally we nowadays emphasize upon the food. Food has a relevance to the body. But from a yogic perspective, food has to be resolved into something more fundamental. It's energy. So, the reason certain foods are not very good is because they make the energy dull. They make it heavy. For example, stale food or food which is already subject to disintegrating forces. Food which is rotting. It's not good simply because it is a hub of disintegrating energies. Even bacteria and viruses, you can look at it from the point of view of energy. It's a very amazing way of looking at it. And therefore, when you take certain foods which have been stored for long, which have been heated and heated over and over again, or which is rotting, it is going to be harmful. Whether we know the exact nature of bacteria or not, it will make the consciousness dull and heavy. It's not very conducive for our health and growth. And then there are foods which increase the vitality. It's full of energy, all kinds of energy. So we have animal foods full of animal energies. We have vegetable, plant food which are full of the energy which sustains life. So it's not that one has to be vegetarian or non-vegetarian. Depends on what kind of energy I want. So if I am a warrior, probably I would want to have meat. I want energy which can give me aggression. But if I want to be a meditating monk, I would probably say that I want energies which are quieter in nature. See the difference So we don't look at it just as vitamins and calories and minerals. We look at it as an energy system. Then there are foods which create a sense of lightness and balance, a state of harmony, like fresh fruits, something which contains within us a principle of harmony. So now not only foods we eat, from the yogic perspective, energy enters into the body not only through food, but through every sense. So everything that I see is an energy. Meaning that why it's going to influence the way my bodily system is going to work. Because I am taking in myself a kind of energy, a packet of energy. So if I really want to be conscious about my health, I have to be careful about what I am seeing. Equally what I am hearing. We must have seen certain kinds of music spontaneously make us tap on the floor. Certain kinds of music make us become as if quieter. There is something going on inside, but something more quieter. Some kind of music, Mother speaks of Beethoven, for example, make you feel uplifted suddenly, as if you are ascending towards greater joy and felicity. So it's not just the sound that we hear, which also means in our everyday interaction, the way we speak, the consciousness and the forces we project onto people. We may harm them unwittingly, of course. A lot of harm is done in this world without wanting to. Or we may help people. So sometimes when we simply say, oh, don't worry, everything will be okay. Those great words of the doctor we now hardly get to hear. I don't know how. Magical words when we didn't have Google to search for our disease. Or, the face which we look at, while the doctor is reading the X-ray, the patient is reading the doctor's face and the nurses. And, when they look at a serious face, the patient has already formed in his mind that, look, I am probably going to die. It's something serious. Now you see what is happening? By this sight and the way a doctor speaks, you are getting an information input through these two systems, which are very, very crucial and critical in everyday life. We don't realize how important this is, how to use this system. And the energies that are entering into me are giving me an information that, look, I am suffering from something serious. And the whole body begins to work in that direction. Precisely because now the body has this input. It's not about actually the prescription and, that is dealing with the material aspect, which is important, as I said. But the energy. With touch, there are different kinds of touches. There are touches that heal. There are touches that harm. There are touches which can be indifferent touches and they have an impact upon us. Smells, taste, everything that we take inside the human body is an energy. The speech is a direct, the most powerful expression of energy states within us. So, when we say someone, we should be careful because unwittingly we are contributing to the person's well-being or, harming. So, we can look at the whole thing as an energy system, and it can go as far as not just the food we are eating, but the person who is cooking it. In India, we have this, I'm sure it's everywhere, that which is the best food. Well, mom's food is the best food, it's not the hotel food. Mom's food is the best food. And ask anyone, why is mom's food the best food? It is simply because there is something mixed in it which nobody else can mix. And that is love. That's the will that, my child should really do well. With everything that a mom does, even when she's angry, this will is there inside. And that aspect which goes into the making of food. Now we can go it still further into the growing of food. I can grow and sell food from the consciousness of just making money. Or I can grow and sell food that, it's given to me to feed those who are hungry. And there is a prayer added in it. And that's why ultimately when we take something in, because we can't control all these things. It's not possible, because we can't, let's say we go to a place and food is being served, there is some music going on. You can't tell everybody that please, or you can't isolate yourself and say, no, I want only this music. Somebody else will be unhappy. So in the yogic system, there was a very interesting trump card. In when you play cards, there is the master card. And that master card, it can be of any value. It's up to you how you want to use it. So there is a cushion, a buffer, a master card within us. And that's what yoga teaches us, and that is the master card of the One. It's called the power of the One. So it doesn't matter. You may call that One by any name, no name, it's really not important. But ultimately, because everything comes from the One and changes into various forms of energy systems, we may say harmful, helpful, it's our way of looking at it. Forces of disintegration, forces of construction. But when you somehow connect them to the One, it begins to, it's like you are calling the master of all the forces and energies right by your side. When you have a lion attacking you and there is a tamer who suddenly comes, then the whole thing changes, because he knows, here is my tamer, I need to obey him. He won't obey us, but he will obey the tamer. So this One is the master of all the energies and forces in the world. So one thing which can always be done is, when we go to a place, when we eat something, when we are in the midst of surrounding, when we are with crowd or a single person, depends on, all human beings are energy system and release energies and absorb energies. But we keep on offering and calling the One. Now when we keep on offering and calling the One, it's not some kind of a, ignorant devotion or worship. It's a scientific process of bringing into active contact this One who can actually take care of all these energies. How it does it, that's where the marvel lies. It's amazing. And I can tell you countless experiences wherein if you invoke the One, it changes the whole nature of things. It's not physically, it will be the same thing, but it will change inwardly, intrinsically the nature of things. Now to practice this calling the One, initially we use some, it's like you want to practice something, piano, you go to a piano school. So you have, churches and temples and mosques and so on and so forth. But when you have practiced it, you don't need any of these things, because the One is everywhere. This is the another fundamental discovery. And he understands, or it understands, the way you want to call it, or she understands all the languages and every possible thing in the world. So this forming an active contact with the One in a state of health and obviously in a state of illness is a very, very powerful question. I have seen working in the ashram people, how they leave the body, how they face illnesses. It's amazing. Because I have worked in a hospital and I have seen when people are ill, how they react. And I have seen a very different perspective here. It's like as if illness is nothing. I have seen people smile even when they are, imminent death. And while such people are everywhere, but it's amazing. And one wants to discover what is it that makes you smile. That famous story about Elizabeth, when all the peasants have come and they want their bread, and she's on her deathbed. I believe it's the mother's own previous life. And she's advised by the doctors, Queen, please don't get up and go because you may die. And she says, but death can wait. Who can say that? It's only when you are rooted in that self that you can say that. So you don't have to look like a yogi or wear the dress like a Swami. That's not important. It's the inner state with which we are in communion with. And if we are in contact with that, it changes the entire system. So on one side, we have to understand the play of energies. which are entering and leaving the system. It's good to have that knowledge, and as far as possible, consciously avoid energies which are going to be harmful. If you meet people who are just abusive and abrasive, it's not a very good thing. Or we ourselves, when we are being abusive and abrasive, we are not doing good to the world. So this is a basic fundamental thing. If we play some beautiful harmonious music, it is helping me. It doesn't matter, the processes and the whys and the hows, they are being discovered now. But this thought that music can help you has been known since ages. Music has a healing power. And the first music that we all have is our speech. It's a God-gifted music.
Would you say the mother's heartbeat?
Well, yes. Yes. So, but this is something where we can actively play. So it's the music given to us. And we should train this musical instrument and use it to project vibrations and energies. And the third and the last thing is that it's not only in an energy system, but there are states of consciousness. If you want to use the word psychological, fine, which impact matter. This also is being now recognized. If I am depressed, now it is impacting my material system, because the information that is being given to my entire body is, what happens when you are depressed, you feel, well, life is not worth living. So all these cells are getting this information. It's not worth living, it's not worth living, it's not worth living. So what do? They start triggering cytokines and many other things which may be which will work towards destruction, because they are just obeying the master. It's not their fault. On the other hand, if I give a message to the body, if I'm in a happy state of consciousness, when I feel life is worthwhile, then I'm giving a different message to the cells. So the take-home point is, number one, we should be careful about the states of consciousness in which we are drifting. Depression is something which should be the most unwelcome guest. Unfortunately, we fall in love with it, because falling in love with depression is to fall in love with myself. I am misunderstood. I am not liked. I am this, I am that. But instead we should say, it doesn't matter what people think about me, or I take charge of myself and I love myself regardless of, what people think or say. So these states of consciousness, there are yogic processes to take care of these states of consciousness. Yoga is ultimately about manipulating these states of consciousness. So where there is hatred, there, what is the teaching of yoga? You bring love. That famous Christ from his cross is saying, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. It's a powerful yogic process by which you replace a moment of anger and hatred which an ordinary human being would be subjected to by the powerful vibration of compassion and love. And this is the practice of yogic teachings. All practitioners of yoga are taught this, that if somebody says something insulting to you, don't react in this way that, I don't care, and you go and see the mirror or whatever else. You simply see this state entering into us like a miasm, and you bring in compassion that maybe, he doesn't understand what harm he is doing to himself and to others. Those who are jealous and angry, they hurt themselves before they can hurt someone else. So this is the way of life wherein we look into our states of consciousness and every day practice to make our consciousness clear and clean. There are moments when we feel so dull, obscure and angry for no reason. It means the consciousness has become very dull and obscure. It's not in a good state. There are moments when we are totally confused. We don't know what to do. It means the consciousness is not clear. So bring clarity. How does clarity come? How does consciousness grow? So according to yoga, beyond the human frame of consciousness means whatever we can experience as human beings, there are ranges of consciousness of which we are ordinarily not aware. We have heard their names and we want it. For example, peace. All of us want peace. But normally, what we understand by peace is when we go to a nice place and for a moment we feel peaceful. Or maybe the dead man's peace, which is not a peace. Or when we just sleep off, we think it's peace. But often we get up with as much heaviness. But there is a peace which is beyond the human dimension, which we can tap into. Many yogic processes are turned towards tapping into these higher states of consciousness, which yogis experience naturally and normally. But we don't. So there are ways and means, for instance, concentration, meditation, aspiration, even imagery. There are ways and means by which we open a door and start tapping these higher states of consciousness, which begin to impact us. Then we discover the power of peace. Peace is not just a word. Actually, a lot of pain or suffering one may be experiencing, and if you call peace, you'll see its impact, physical impact. The pain begins to first, as if there is a solvent which is acting and it's dissolving as if a knot is opening up, and after some time, if you are a practitioner of yoga and accustomed to calling peace, you just wonder where did it vanish. And I can tell you without need of any analgesics. So many times, countless times, I have experienced, and I'm sure many others have experienced, the power of peace. We are in an environment where, there is threat, and nowadays, there is threat everywhere from various quarters. So what do? Just call peace. And if we get surrounded by this atmosphere of peace, we will walk through the danger. And while things may be happening around us, but we'll go unscathed. It's like a zone which nothing penetrates. It's so powerful. So we must every day build an atmosphere of peace and goodwill around us. Because if we have never tried it, then suddenly one day we try it, then it doesn't work. It may work because, if we call with a great intensity, it may work. But it's much better that every day we spend 10-15 minutes in tapping into these higher states of consciousness, higher kinds of energy, higher reservoirs of light. It's like we have gone past the fossil fuels into the solar energy. 100 years back or 200 years back, nobody knew that there is an inexhaustible source of energy which we are not using. And it doesn't charge. As far as I know, sun doesn't charge us for that. Though we charge for using its energy. We make money out of it. Well, none of them. Water doesn't charge itself. Petrol doesn't charge itself. Nature doesn't take charge. Nature only wants us to be happy. She's a lovely mother. And when we smile, nature says, I am very happy. But human beings add to it dollars and rupees. And that's where the problem starts. Okay, so this is just a background. And any questions if you ask or anything you wish to respond to. Yes, please.
So my mother is 102 years old.
Wow.
Depression is a part of her life. Losing her mental acuity is a part of her life.
Yes.
And when I talk to her, she says, I'm ready for death. And yet, I don't know why I'm still here. So, with your insights into this, is there anything I can help her with?
Yes, it's a very, very good question, and several times we face this issue. Now, first I'll take it in a general way, then what could be done in particular. If I am alive, there is still something to do. That's the first part. And that something to do may not necessarily be physically, because we think physically. So we get very depressed when our physical faculties begin to fail. We can't hear, we can't walk steadily, we can't do things ourselves, we can't see. So we begin to believe that I can't do anything. But that's what I said, it's because we are so identified with the body that the moment the body begins to break, I believe I am breaking down. So there are things we can do which do not need the active participation of the body, which are not only as important but perhaps more important, but we have never paid attention to it. So I had a child who at 14 was suffering from this progressive muscular dystrophy, inevitable death, who raised the same question. So he was very depressed, contemplating suicide. And he said the same thing, I cannot do what other children can do. I asked him, for example, well, he said, other children, they can climb trees, they can cycle and play cricket. I said, yes, I understand. Is there something you can do which others can also do? He said, yes, for example, I can read books. I said, good. Is there something which you can do better than others precisely because you are not active in the body? Then he, within a few seconds, intuitively, he said, I can think, I can pray, I can meditate. So what happens when the elderly, go through these processes, we get more and more focused only on the bodily care. Now, bodily care is important, but it's equally important to show them that there is another direction to life. I'm sorry, I had to keep it on because as a doctor, I may just get a call. So now I put it on silent, but I still may have to attend. So, what is important is to show them that there are things we can still do, which are very important, and perhaps that is the reason why we are in the situation we are in, because we are called upon to do something which maybe we may not have done with the depth and the intensity it deserves, and that's why we are still alive, and there is a purpose. Second thing which elderly people need, this is one part, this is the most profound part, is the sense of dignity, love and respect. Now I am sure you are giving it, I have no doubt about it. But very often in homes of the elderly, for example, I have seen. So they just start feeling that I am a burden. And they need this reassurance from people around that, look, we want you to be here because it helps us. We love you. We treasure your love. We treasure the moments we spend with you. So this is the second part of it that, they need to hear this. It has to be reinforced several times because, maybe after a few days they again feel. Because, naturally, they don't like that all their life they are trained to take care of the children. And suddenly they see their child is, taking care and they feel miserable that, my child has to do these things. You may be 70, but you are still a child. My child has to do these things for me and, I am a burden. So they have to be reminded you are not a burden, it's a joy. Third is, a good activity is to maybe read something together, maybe 15-20 minutes, something uplifting, something very beautiful. Because obviously they can't read themselves, but they can hear. Then that is something very good. Yeah. But there are people who can't read for various reasons, concentration is failing. Now very often people think that, they can't remember, they can't understand. That's not the issue. It's an energy which is going. So as I said, it's not important whether they are understanding actively or participating. Maybe when you are reading something beautifully, they may just doze off. It's okay. Not to worry about it. But still that energy and that atmosphere is surrounding them. One of the best things that I found is just to play some beautiful music in the environment. So that, it creates a kind of envelope around them. And every time they speak of things like depression and all that, to remind them how valuable their life is still to us. Not just that their life has been valuable, that of course is one part of it. But that doesn't satisfy a human being. What about today? And how valuable it is just for their presence. So at various levels we can intervene. What happens many times, doctors, focus on the physical or on the medication that, we are reaching the limits of the body. Let's realize it. So when we reach our limits, then there is a very interesting proverb. When you face a wall, then change and pass through. So when we reach the limits, and that is the time to break through into the limitless, into another dimension of existence. So I think that's in a very nutshell how we should do when we are face to face with the elderly. One very important sense organ which is very active right up to the end, which we don't fully utilize, is the anyone power of which sense? Give. Hearing is there, eyes are there, but something very intimate gives you the sense of intimacy. Touch. That's why there is a word called the healing touch. I have seen people in coma suddenly quiver when somebody very dear, very lovingly just holds the hand. It's a twitch. And now there are studies, of course, MRI, you actually. Please touch. Please don't lose out on this faculty. Even after somebody has just departed, it's not a dead body. Just hold the hand and sit by the side. These gestures have such a great importance. So touch. This we miss out on this, especially in a busy. I've seen it in even hospitals, hospice care. People speak, they say nice things, but for some reason they don't touch. In old times, what doctors used to do when they came home, they would touch. In India, this was very. If the doctor touches the head and says everything will be fine, we used to take it that God has said. He was like God. Now God has become businessman, but that's a different thing. But those days when you just touch the head and held the hand, they must come back. Know the value.
I've seen that even with newborn children.
Yes.
They put them in an incubator.
Exactly.
Everything is connected, and
Yes.
you see their heart beating unrhythmically. And then
It's a horrifying
I
thing.
ask the mother to go and stroke the child. Suddenly it changes.
The contact comfort, even there are psychological studies that the first 3 years are so important. The contact, it doesn't matter. It's the warmth you get, just the security you get, the love it just passes. It's like a direct contact. It's, when you go for putting gas or petrol, I'm sorry if Yeah. I understand,
We
yeah.
lost
Yeah.
my dad and her grandmother this year, and the things they were saying, so it just touched my heart. So anyway, but my apologies.
No. I can understand. Yes, we all go through these states, and it's good for us to. Sometimes we may not. We are not able to do this to our own nearest one because the person is away or whatever. But then it's a knowledge we can share and reach out and touch countless hearts. That look, must do it. This is so important, so invaluable, right? So. I understand. These are states we all experience. It's the sign of our humanness. If we don't experience it, then we have to. I always say that a disease with which we are suffering from in modern society, since some of you are from the sociological background, is the diminution of the energy of love. It's so strange. Now, we have many friends on Facebook, WhatsApp, but that love which flows from the heart reaches out to another, this great degree of isolation. We are as if walking in a crowd, and we are afraid of strangers, we are afraid of friends, we are afraid of, so few friends. It's hardly any time. So I suppose we need to awaken this energy. It's the great healing power, the power of love. Sometimes we don't need to say a word, just to hold and feel. I think it was Keats who said, or Shelley who said about stand and stare. We have no time now to stand and stare. So we need to just hold and just stay for a while, just holding, nothing else. It'll do much greater good than a doctor's prescription of medicine. Yes.
I work in a drop-in clinic in Eugene, Oregon, and I work with a lot of counselors. And when I walk into the room, I sense the energy or the lack of energy.
Yes, that would be better.
And their clients, some, they never come back because the counselor has no energy of their own to share with their clients.
Yes.
And so, I don't want to brag, but me and a friend of mine, we work with Vietnam veterans, war veterans, and things like that.
Right.
And before I go into my office, I have to get ready.
Right.
I have to be at a good place. And sometimes when the clients come in, I just sit. I say nothing, and they cry, and they laugh, and they get happy, and they thank me, and I did nothing. thing.
That's the power of doing nothing. You see what happens, especially a counselor, since you mentioned about it. Counselor goes through a training process which is extremely mentalized. We are taught the various systems, and we are trapped in another kind of belief system, just like, in certain kind of belief system. So a counselor is living so much in the head with all his theories that the moment a client comes, his mind has become active. That's why the word used is analysis. So you are analyzing the patient like you are, in a test tube analyzing some chemical. Every word that he speaks or doesn't speak is being analyzed. So my left brain is extremely active at the expense of my heart. That's not what a client wants. Client doesn't want a label that, oh, I understand, my repressed desires have caused this. That's not the issue. The issue is he first wants to be heard, and heard with a compassionate heart. See, hearing is again, hearing, seeing, we spoke about these senses. Which is the sixth sense? The mind. Mind as a all-comprehensive entity, not just the brain. The mind in its totality. That ultimately hears. So one is just listening with the ears and sending this information straight to my left brain. Why? Because I have read some books and I've been trained into a system of therapy. It's the worst way to really approach. You have to break free from these systems because you are dealing with a live, conscious human being. It's not a system to, be fitted into a paradigm and proved and convicted. Because when we judge a person, we have convicted the person. So a therapist has to be very non-judgmental. It is to just listen to human beings with compassion that, well, we as human beings have many frailties and we have a lot of issues, and it's not about being good or bad, but just to listen, and listen with the heart and with the energy of compassion. And I think then doing nothing is doing everything, because we allow that compassion to flow quietly into the patient, and that heals. But we want to give an understanding as to mental understanding. What's going on inside. There was a movie very nice on 34 Miller Street. You see, very old movie. Amazing movie. A 17-year-old child, is being analyzed by a counselor, and he said, you have done some sin and you are repressing it. And he says, what sin? Then he says, okay, I stole some chocolates from some place. And then he meets the real Santa. And he says, what you could do as a child? What sin you could do? But we as human beings live in a trap of our own systems that we have created. And God laughs at them. He doesn't look at them, he laughs at them because he knows from the totality. So vastness, compassion, love, they are beautiful things with which we probably will need none of these systems if we could just meet a client. The word counselor is a big thing. I always tell people, you are not coming to a counselor, excuse me. It's a friend. Another thing which has corrupted the whole original file of man is the excessive importance given to money and success. So I know doctors who want to publish papers, though that's how they go up the echelons of fulfilling their ambition. How many papers published, how many big forums they are invited to. This is a brutal truth, isn't it? And they also have to take care of their pockets, because they also live under the illusion that if I have lots of money, I can take care of my children better. But in all this process, we lose upon, as I said, the energies of the heart. We are advancing on civilization by crushing the heart, which is not a very good thing. We have to refine and purify the heart, make it something beautiful. But instead we just repress this energy, because if you are emotional, you'll end up, probably doing things which are not good. So we are never taught to train and refine the emotional being. So a typical setting is where money plays, and when there is money, it's a question of time. I know people who have, okay, I have 20 minutes set apart for you and the clock is ticking. That's not an atmosphere where a person can really share anything with you. So I think that's some of the things. Now the clock reminds me of some of my clients waiting out there. And it's such a joy. Maybe, yes. If there is anything, please feel free to communicate. My email is there with Shruti, and feel free to communicate. It's been a joy to meet all of you.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for the beautiful collective energy.
I kind of regret not being a patient.
The best doctor is the doctor who doesn't see a patient. Not having patients is a good sign. In ancient China, doctors were paid when they didn't have patients. So it will be the sign of a family doctor if nobody in the family falls sick. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.